Freedom Seekers, we are live here on a Monday evening for another weekly wrap-up and update as well. And so I hope that you are enjoying these weekly wrap-ups and updates. Last week's was quite popular. I think it was probably because of the it's called a thumbnail that shows the picture of the video on without actually seeing the video. And so yeah, it got probably at least 6 times more views than normal, and I appreciate that. And but I think that's because YouTube was out there showing around a little bit, and so it got some more views. But at any rate, I am going to look forward to tonight's little conversation. I hope that you will as well. And I'm just kind of spinning my wheels here a little bit for just a few moments as I do. If I give people about 5 minutes to come on board. And so if you're not wanting to listen to all this jibber jabber and really want to see what the heart of this video is about, then please go ahead and fast forward for about 5 minutes or 6 minutes. And that should do it, so that you don't have to watch and listen to all this jibber jabber up front. And so, yes, I always want to give time for people to get on board here if they want to do that. And that YouTube sends out a notification to those who are subscribed to the channel, letting them know that I am here and live. And then I like to make sure that people have a little bit of time to jump on board. And then also, one of the things that I always enjoy is interacting with my audience, and that would be an audience that whether you are watching the recording of this or whether you are here live. And so if you're here live, go ahead and be sure to let me know where you're coming to me from, what city and state you are at. If you are here on the recording, then go ahead and comment with any questions that you might have down in the comments section. And also let me know what city and state that you are coming from. And if you're outside the United States, then please let me know what country you're coming from. I'm always excited to hear from our viewers that are outside the United States. And I know that a lot of people are interested in ethical and consensual non-monogamy around the world. And so I'm happy to have viewers from all over the world. You know, there are some countries that are highly religious. You know, as an example of that is the Philippines, where Kat and I have an interest in starting to live part of each year in. And in those countries, they're highly Catholic in the Philippines. In those countries that are highly religious, like, you know, Philippines and I know Mexico has got also very high number of Catholic faith people. You know, I find that that's just really interesting because the faith that they have is often very separate from the life that they live. And so, for instance, in the Philippines, where the Catholic faith is very strong, where that really applies to people's lives is that they generally do not believe in birth control pills, and yet they have a lot of sex outside of marriage. And so I just find that very interesting. Many of the men are known to have mistresses on the side, and also they don't have divorce laws there in the Philippines, so that you can't get a divorce. A lot of guys just simply don't want to get married because of that, and therefore they'll get a gal pregnant and they'll just take off and leave her with the baby. And they don't have laws where, like in the United States, where the dad has to then support that child. It's just then a single mom left on her own. And so it's very different in other parts of the world, and particularly those parts of the world that are highly religious parts of the world. You know, they do things very differently, but that doesn't mean then that they are monogamous, and that many times they are non-monogamous. but there's a lot more cheating that goes on and a lot more unethical and non-consensual behavior that goes on in those countries. And so those are not the kinds of behaviors that we think are healthy for a society or an individual. And so we really try to create a world where we recognize that human beings are sexual beings. And there's nothing to be ashamed of, being that we love to have sex. Nothing to be ashamed about that. And let's recognize, let's acknowledge that, let's embrace that. Even when it comes to your kids, you know, whatever age your kids are. I mean, my gosh, Kat, she started getting just sexually interested when she was like 6. By the time she was 7, she was having her dolls have sex. By the time she was 8, she was, you know, playing touch me with a neighbor girl, and so this is not uncommon with children. And we are sexual human beings, and the better that we acknowledge and recognize that, the better we actually help our children to enjoy and explore their sexuality, then the better this world will become. And so it's 6.5 minutes now about into our time. And so let me go ahead and start with the weekly review and wrap up. Well, I am really, so let me just take a pause. Sometimes I'll actually edit the front of this off, and then I'll start the video right from the beginning. If I take and edit the front of it, I'll just go into YouTube and I slice it off. But that takes a lot of extra work to do that, about 20 minutes of time. But at any rate, so we're 7 minutes in now, so I'm going to take a quick short break, and I mean 15 seconds so that it's easy to edit, and then I'll be right back and we'll get on with the evening's material. Well, hello, freedom seekers. I am very excited to be here tonight, and we're going to talk about how my transformation and my reframing my life at this point is very similar to the process that I went through 13 years ago when I reframed my thinking from a religious-based monogamous thinking to a non-monogamous thinking. I reframed my thoughts to begin with, also not only a non-monogamous, but a different thinking from what I had had most of my life, from a religious thinking about sex and about having sex with people you're not married to and things like that. And so I reframed my thinking, and then once I reframed my thinking, I started to transform my life. And in transforming my life, the process also then meant that I was either going to get divorced or I was going to open my marriage, because I was not willing to continue to live in monogamy. And I wasn't going to cheat on my wife either. And so I had been 27 years in sexual, what I call torment and misery in my monogamous marriage, and staying faithful to my wife, where I did not cheat. And so at that point, then it was time to be able to start enjoying my sexuality and enjoy the fact that I'm a sexual human being. And I had to do something then about that. And so that process, now, as I've gone through in previous videos, that process at first, for the first year, did not go well. You know, but that's okay. We just, like I say, when your life is, whether it be about sex or whether it be something that goes on at work or just whatever is going on, this COVID-19 virus thing, you know, that sometimes you just need to hit the button that says stop, and you take a deep breath, and then you hit another button that says do over. you know, whether that be the same day or start doing over the next day. You know, you just sometimes just need to stop and take that breath and chill out for the evening, and then come back the next morning and start over the next morning from a different mindset. And so that's sometimes what is needed. And so my wife and I, when we transitioned from a 27-year monogamous marriage to our non-monogamous life, then it took us a year to just stop, take a breath, let things settle in a little bit, and then we could continue on with regular conversation that kept our relationship then moving forward in the direction of an ethical and consensual non-monogamous life. And so I'm going to be doing a coaching program later this year or first part of next year that will be helping people that are in that flux of needing to transition from monogamy to non-monogamy and just really don't know quite how to do it. You know, I talk to people all the time about this. Some people just as a couple, you know, they talk about it and they just jump in. Some people that we had a really nice time. My partner Kat and I had a really nice time with last Friday night. That they met as single people. They hit it off really well. They moved in together, became a committed, loving couple, and they then just started to talk about non-monogamy, and they all both thought that it would be something great to try out, and so they just jumped in. But you know, so that's one possibility of how it can go for people, and other people not so much, in that there's somebody that feels threatened, or somebody that says, well, aren't I enough? You know, what's wrong with me? And they take it personal like that, and so forth. And so there's lots of different responses that people have in when they, you know, are going to think about, as a couple, moving into a non-monogamous life that they've not explored and experienced before. And so sometimes people are doing that very easily and make that shift and transition on their own. And sometimes some coaching is a really big help. And particularly then to really kind of have an outline of steps that you can follow that really helps you to kind of have some structure to it. Last week's video, it talked about structure and tension and these kinds of things, and how that is part of a process that's very important in creating a life that you love the most and keeping your life moving forward in designing and creating that life. And so that structure is important, but you know, sometimes it's just a matter of taking time to go through some steps, and oftentimes those steps are just not known, because these aren't things we're taught. And since they're not known steps, then that's something where it's helpful to have a coach help you along with it. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over to my notes here, and that way I'll share my screen and I will go through and talk about the things that we're going to talk about. Let me get to that. Okay, I think that you can see that then. And here I wanted to share this week. I wanted to start out by sharing, you know, a blow up of the thumbnail that we had on last week's video, and that I had my partner Kat on that video with me, and as she explained then that yes, this was taken where we had gotten naked, completely stripped down naked. We had gone on a hike to an oasis out by Joshua Tree National Park, and we stripped down naked. We just love being naked in the outdoors. And yes, it was a public place, you know, so we were taking some risk being naked. And so we stripped down naked, and there we took a photograph of ourselves using a selfie stick, and the cat was holding out there. And so you get a chance to just enjoy her beauty and enjoy me as well. and particularly if you're female. Just a funny little side note here. You know, the last time that we were outside and naked like we were also we had picture was taken 3 years ago, but last March we went for a hike. We went for a couple days out at Joshua Tree National Park. We really love that national park, and we went for a 9-mile hike one day. And so on that hike, we had been hiking out. So we'd been out about halfway point, which is probably being just about about 4 miles, maybe 4.5 miles. And we found a nice little spot that we could have sex. And so we decided to go ahead and get naked and have some sex. And we're just in the start of having a lovely time. And off in a distance, I heard some voices. And so, yeah, there was only one trail in the area, and we couldn't be off the trail because it was a very sensitive area, and the signs posted as you start the hiking in that area that do not go off the trails, and we really respect those things. And so we didn't want to just go wandering off the trail. It meant that if we were going to have sex, we had to have sex and find a place that was going to work for us there on the trail. And hopefully there was nobody else around. Well, in this case, there was. And we had a little bit of private time. We probably, I don't know, had 15, 20 minutes alone and got naked and started to have sex. You know, I had a little bit of a blowjob and was in the process of having a full Monty there. And when I heard the voices in the distance, and so at that point I stopped what I was doing and decided it was time to put our clothes back on. And so we got our clothes back on, and then hiked off out of the trail. And we found out when we watched for those voices to catch up with us, it was a group of 10 adults. And so it's always interesting to me. I always wonder, well, what if we had just kept doing what we were doing? And would they had wanted to join? Would they had just wanted to watch? Would they had just been so shocked and, you know, mortified? You know, what would have been the response and reaction? So I have no idea. But, you know, let me know in the comments section what your reaction would be if there we were smiling and having a good time and you happened to come upon us and we were going at it. What would be your reaction? Now, I would expect, though, that my audience would react very positively. One of my fantasies is that we'd be out hiking and be thinking about having sex somewhere while we're hiking, and then we'd meet somebody, a man or woman or a couple along the way, or a couple of guys or a couple of women or a couple of couples or just a group of people that would want to join us. And so I'd have maybe a half dozen condoms with me, and we'd then go out and have a really great time having sex. That's one of my fantasies and desires. It may happen or it may not, but you know, that's the lovely thing when you start to really embrace the fact that you are a sexual being and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. We don't want to offend other people with it, and not everybody thinks like that we do. But so I don't want to offend other people, and I certainly don't want children to come upon, you know, me having sex with my partner out there, and you know, totally. I don't mind children coming upon us naked. In some areas, you know, the nakedness and nudity and nude hiking and so forth is perfectly acceptable. And a lot of the national parks or national forest lands and so forth, BLM lands and so forth, you can Google that. Where is it acceptable to hike naked in the national parks and stuff like that? But there's information out there about that. But so it's like, yeah, then if a family comes upon you, you know, I mean, they may be shocked and surprised because they may not know that it's perfectly okay to hike naked out there. And but you know, it's not a problem. And so that's one thing. But to be having sex out there is a very inappropriate thing and wrong thing to do if you're going to have any chance at all know, having children and kids come upon you. And so that was just the wrong thing to do. And so the thing that we really want to encourage you with and to help you with, and that's why I come on here every Monday night, is and have these conversations where I talk about the transitions going on in my life, the transformations that are being made, and they relate to my income, but the same processes that I'm going through are the processes that I went through when I moved my life from a monogamous life to a non-monogamous life. And I then talk about that every week here on these videos. And so what we want to do is to help you to take a chance on your dreams of having more sex with more people more often, increasing the satisfaction and pleasure in your life. And that's the desire that we have to help you, and I hope that you are having more satisfaction and pleasure in your life. So comment in the comments section and let us know how that is working for you. And so let's go ahead and move on then. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about tonight is when you are the bottleneck. You know, I talk to people regularly and people message me in various forms of communication that we have, you know, and they'll say, well, you sure are a lucky guy. I sure wish I could, or I sure wish that I would find a sexy woman or a sexy partner or a sexy man, all kinds of things that I get messaged with, you know. And it's thing about that is that the people all the time in my audience here on YouTube, you know, I get messages and stuff that basically is the idea is that, well, sure wish that I could live an ethical and consensual non-monogamous life. But you see, you can. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, because oftentimes people think that, well, they just can't. And so they wish, but it's really just a daydream or a fantasy. And it's not anything that they're going to ever really create in their life to be real. And so, you know, I come here every week. I'm really wanting to help you to create that life where you are having more sex with more people more often, and it's done ethically and consensually so that you're not cheating and things of that nature. And so what we find, though, is that oftentimes we get in our own way and we become our own bottleneck. I found that this week in the transition that I'm making, and I'll talk more about that as I get to the part of the video where I talk about the weekly review and update on my own progress. But I wanted to first just touch on this idea and ask you, when you are the bottleneck, what do you do about it? You know, what? And so the idea here is that take a look, and I'll be talking you through this a little better as I go through my own process and structure that I showed last week, the structure that I use every week in my life. And so as you utilize a structure that's very similar to that in every area, every section, everything that you're trying to accomplish, just ask yourself, are you being the bottleneck? And we find that oftentimes we are tripping over ourselves, or we are creating our own issues. I certainly have found that over the years many times in my life where I was the bottleneck. But see, it's so easy that rather than looking at ourselves, it's so easy that we are always looking at everybody else and everything else, and we want to blame other things. We want to come up with all kinds of reasons and all kinds of excuses as to why we aren't making $10,000 more this year than we were last year, as to why we aren't having more sex with more people more often this year than we did last year, as to why we aren't losing the weight that we want to lose, as to why we aren't having the health that is going to help us to enjoy a lovely, juicy sex life for the rest of our life. And so these kinds of things that we don't even ask ourselves, because we don't want to look internally and look at us and ask, am I the bottleneck? And where am I holding up? So let's talk about what is a bottleneck. And I'm going to read the definition I have here. I wrote the definition earlier today. And a bottleneck is a point of congestion that impedes progress when the workloads arrive too quickly for the workflow to flow without slowing down. Now that's a lot of words, and I forgot that I shortened that up, so I'm going to go ahead and shorten that up with you right here, right now, because after I read it, I was actually posting it on a comment to someone, and I realized that I could just end it right there. And so let me go over that again. Then a bottleneck is a point of congestion that impedes progress. And so I ask you to ask yourself, am I the bottleneck? That means, are you the point of congestion, the traffic jam, essentially, that impedes the progress in your own goals and desires and wishes for your life? And then the following up is the inefficiencies brought about by the bottleneck often create delays and increasing costs. That was one of the things that I addressed this week, is that my inefficiencies brought about by the bottleneck, which was me, was creating delays and increased costs. And so in your own life, depending upon what your goal is, if your goal is not having more sex with more people more often, then yeah, that kind of a delay can create costs too, and increasing costs, And for instance, for me, it was really a situation where I probably should have taken the risk of potentially getting a divorce to end my marriage long before I went ahead and had those conversations with my wife, and then spent the 2 years of transitioning to an open marriage. And so it increased costs for me, because we had spent a lot of money in therapists and counselors trying to sort things out and improve our sex life. When you see the problem is that we were trying to be monogamous when we really needed to be non-monogamous. And so that was the problem. Well, another definition for bottleneck is that it's a choking point that keeps you from reaching your potential. Are you the choking point? I'll be telling you about how I came across this week where I realized that I am the choking point. And so just when you look at the things that you set out and the roadmap, because I want you to, again, look at the format, the structure that I create. And last week we talked about structure, we talked about tension, and I create the structure and the tension every week so that it keeps me moving forward. And we want you to do the same thing, because wouldn't you like to be having more sex with more people more often? Wouldn't you like to have more money? Wouldn't you like to have more health? What's keeping you from all of that? When you really think about that, oftentimes you may find that you're a bottleneck. And so the thing about bottlenecks is that you want to reduce or eliminate them. And so in reducing or eliminating them, then what I recommend, because in our lives, we are trained, we are conditioned as part of our culture and our society, as part of our work world, that you can't take a chance of being wrong, can't take a chance of making mistakes. You've got to be somebody that really comes across as being, hey, I know what I'm doing here, and everything is good. You can count on me. You can count on that everything is good. Instead of learning from our failures and our mistakes and be willing to make failures and mistakes. You see, last November, I came to a place realizing that I was stumbling in transitioning, this process of transitioning my income from being where I'm trading my time for dollars for hours, or excuse me, I'm trading my time, my hours for dollars. And it's just, I have to show up in order to make the money. And so I'm trading my hours for dollars. And I wanted to transition to where I had an online income where I can go anywhere I want to travel to around the world, as long as I've got a good solid internet connection, a power supply, and a good computer, then I can make my living. And so I started working on that last year. And then in November, I realized that there was just some things about myself that was creating mental barriers. I had my own mental blocks that were keeping me from moving ahead. And I became the bottleneck in November. And I saw that. Once you acknowledge it, awareness is the first step. And in fact, we have a program that we teach, and I say we, Kat and I teach, that's 12 points on going from, for change and growth. We actually call it 12 pillars of growth. And the first pillar of that is awareness. You have to be aware before you can move forward to the second pillar, the third pillar, the fourth pillar, and so forth. And so awareness is the first pillar. And so you've got to be aware of the fact that, ask yourself and find out, where are you the bottleneck? One of the things that I found that I was the bottleneck in transitioning my marriage from monogamy to non-monogamy years ago was that I had a great difficulty talking about these things with my wife. After we got past the first year, I actually found that she had an easier time talking about sex, talking about non-monogamy and having sex with other people. She had a much easier time talking about it than I did. And so maybe it's the same way with you. And so you want to first then become aware of what your bottlenecks are, where your bottlenecks are, and then you want to figure out how to reduce or eliminate them. Now, we teach all of that in our coaching program, so I'm not going to really get involved or in too deep with that tonight. Can't do that in a short time span here, but if you want to know more about our coaching programs, then email me. My email address is down there in the description box, and just email me. Now, so the next thing is to realize is to ask yourself about what could you do. Now, this is something we use with our coaching clients. And so, for instance, one example is that if you want to take and say in 90 days from now, you want to be making an extra $1,000 a month, we are so stuck in a narrowly defined view of that it's so narrow that we lose our creativity. And when you eliminate the choices and the options from your life, then you live a more limited and restricted life. And monogamy was all about limitations and restrictions. And I learned moving out of monogamy that I didn't want limitations and restrictions in my life. And so what we teach today is how to open up your choices and your options and your opportunities. So you have more opportunities, more options, and more choices. Now, one of the things is to realize is that those opportunities and options and choices in anything that you're doing, if you're moving from monogamy to non-monogamy, or if you're already non-monogamous, but you simply want more sex with more people more often, or, if you're working on moving your income like I am, in opening up more choices then means we have to start thinking in terms of possibilities. But we have conditioned our brains so much to narrow things down and minimize things that sometimes it can be rather hard to do that. So we suggest to people, go ahead and put at the top of the piece of paper, what it is that you're wanting to accomplish in the next 90 days. And then ask yourself, what can I do this week to help get us there? And then you make a small list of the things that you can do this week to get you there. And then you ask yourself this question: what could I do this week? So let's say that your goal then this week was to make, say, $500 extra. Well, if that became your goal, then what could I do? Well, one example is you could rob a bank or rob a 7-Eleven store. Now, I am not telling you to go out and do that, but the thing is that when you want to start to really get the creativity flowing in your brain, you want to take and write all your coulds down, even the things that are absolutely absurd and nonsense, but write them down, because that gets the creativity. You may write down a list of 20 different things that you could do, and yet it'll be only one or two of those that you actually then find that are actually what you end up determining is doable for you. But you need to find the best one or two things that are going to be doable for you. And if you limit and restrict your thinking process, then you'll have a very difficult time coming up with enough options and choices and opportunities for you that so you can open up those options, those choices, and those opportunities, and find those choices that are truly going to work the best for you. And so that's then the step in reducing your bottlenecks. Then you want to ask, what could I do? And then the next thing is that you want to, once you list, you create your list of what the things that I could do, all the different possibilities. Then go ahead and highlight the ones, or move them onto another sheet of paper or another column on that sheet of paper, and deciding what are the items that you will do. And so that's the process that I utilize in every week, in having the structure and the tension, like I spoke about last week's video, and in all of my goals, in that I look at, what could I do, and decide then what will I do, and then I want to take a look. Am I being the bottleneck, or are there any bottlenecks anywhere in the whole program? And so you want to always be looking for those bottlenecks. Now, I see that you're here, Andy. Let's see, where are you from? I'm doing great. And Andy B, you are, but let us know what state and city you're coming from. I appreciate your being here. And so thank you. But I'll take a look here in a moment what state and city you're from. And I'm going to go on to the next thing here. And that is the weekly update that I do every week. And that is where I talk about my transition. And my transition that I'm going through now, as I mentioned earlier, is all about my income. But that transition is really the same process that I used when I was going from a monogamous life into non-monogamy. And so if you have any questions about any of this and how this can apply to you for whatever area that you're working on in your life, and I'm going to be breaking down those areas here for you in just a moment. But for whatever area you are working on in your life, if you have any questions and need some help with that, then feel free to comment. But to start out with, you want to list out what your overriding desire is. Your top desire, the thing that you are most focused on. Now, back 13 years ago, the thing that I was most focused on after 27 years of monogamy, and that actually was, it took 2 years for my wife and I to transition our marriage from monogamy to non-monogamy. And so with that 2-year process, that was actually 15 years ago that we started it. And then it ended 13 years ago when we opened up our marriage and started living our non-monogamous lives. But so my overriding desire at that point was simply to fuck a lot of more women and have a lot more sex with more women more often, and just have a really great time. And that was my overriding desire. And so you want to write that down. So, go ahead and just follow along what I'm doing here, or replay the video, and you want to just write that down. Now, I've got 2 overriding desires, and one is to create an online passive income of $5,000 a month. Now, passive income, that means that I could be taking a month or 2 or 3 months off, and the income would continue coming into me. So I'm not having to trade my time for money anymore. And so, in fact, I really want to create a passive income where I can even take a year or two off, and that money will continue to come. Now, $5,000, as I have described before, that's just the first step. And then my longer range desire is to be making $20,000 a month, and that's very doable for me. My last successful business that I built, slow month was $20,000 and I made, and on average month was about $40,000 or $50,000, and on my best month ever was $65,000. Now that sounds like, for a guy like me, that sounds really like a lot of money. I don't know if that is for you or not, but from where I came from, working class family and all, it really was. It was a lot of money, and it was thrilling to be able to make that kind of money month after month, and go get up every day and knowing that, okay, I'm going to make $1,000 today. And in fact, my father-in-law, he said to me, he says, well, Mark, why do you even bother to work more than 2 months of the year? And that he really just didn't see why I kept driving myself. But that's where my desire right now my end desire is to make $20,000 a month, but we have to chunk it down into bite-sized chunks. And so my first stop along the way for my goals now is to create an ongoing online passive income of $5,000 a month. And then also, Kat and I, we're working on creating an online non-monogamous relationships academy. And that's an academy, if you're familiar with Udemy, think of a Udemy type academy for people in non-monogamous relationships, people who are curious about non-monogamous relationships, or people who are transitioning to non-monogamous relationships. That's what we want to create, and we're working on creating that now. And so let me go ahead then into this structure that I talked about, and this is the weekly report this past week. My focus, I'm going to give you a pass. I'm going to give myself a pass or a fail, and I have my goals listed here for my work and wealth, also for my sex and relationships, and for my health and wellness. I suggest that you do the same, and then you determine which of those is in alignment with your overriding desire. Is your overriding desire in the area of your health and wellness? Is it in your sex and relationships, or is it in your work and wealth? And then whatever area that is, put that at the top. And so for me, it's my work and wealth. And so I'm going to go through this, what we set last week for my goals, and I'll just tell you if I passed or failed. And I'll go through rather quickly. Continue to build my online store, thehomenudist.com. I'm giving myself a pass on that, and then I continue to do that. Begin running and testing the 5 Facebook ads targeted on ECNM people, and I give myself a fail on that. I just did not have time for that. And I said last week that I'd probably give myself a fail on a lot of this because it wasn't any way possible to get it all done last week. And so there's going to be a number of fails. That's okay. I find long ago that by having it on the list, that provides me with attention, and then I start prioritizing things, and slowly I start taking and getting things done, and I go from fail to pass, and then it gets things accomplished. And so create 5 Facebook ads for the communications course targeted on divorce. I'm going to give myself a fail on that. Week 6 of 12 of magnetic mindset certification training. I'll give myself a pass on that. Review the weeks 1 through 3 for magnetic mind certification training. I'll give myself a fail on that. Set up and have a magnetic mind practice session, and I'll give myself a pass on that. Edit and post 1 video. Got it edited but not posted, so I'm giving myself a fail on that. Do 1 live YouTube briefing. I got it all written out, ready to go, but I did not get the briefing done, and so I'll give myself a fail. Index 5 software purchases. Another fail on that one. Index 5 of the videos on my YouTube's channel, and did not do that, so there's another fail. Doing my lenses every day. Now, this is something that was not on here last week. That's something I actually added here today, that I just as a reminder for this next week. And so I'll talk about that in a moment. And so no fail or pass on that because it wasn't part of last week's objectives for and so no pass or fail. Complete doing the things needed to drive to Seattle. Did not complete the bookkeeping, and so that's a fail. Did not complete getting the bank accounts squared away for online access, so that's a fail. Did not complete my expense accounting and tracking, so that's a fail. Did not complete the expenses transferred, that's a fail. Budgeted for my trip to Seattle, that's a pass. And new brakes on my car. And I did not get the new brakes on the car. I actually have an appointment tomorrow, and so I'm going to give myself a pass on that because it wasn't any way possible to get in last week to get it done, but got the appointment at least made, and so I'll give myself a fail or a pass on that. About the sex and relationships, I have a play date for a threesome with my best friend. I give myself a pass on that. Have a play date for a foursome with a bi-male and bi-female couple. I'll give myself a pass on that. Had a lovely time. And then in addition, that just last night, I had my slut in training over for a play date as well. So I was able to squeeze that in and had a lovely time with her. And it's always a balance though, because I love my sex life. And love having sex with, more sex with more people more often. And, that means that like last night, instead of having my girlfriend over, I call her my slut in training, instead of having her over to have sex with her, I could have been given a couple things done on my list where I could have then given myself a pass on a couple more things. But the thing is that I'm leaving this week. I'm leaving, in fact, on Wednesday morning to drive to Seattle. I will take 3 days to drive to Seattle, and I'll be in Seattle for about 2 months. And so with that, I wanted to see my slut in training, and she messaged me wanting to see me, and I had been thinking about it, and so she messaged me wanting to see me, and so I decided to go ahead last night and see her and add that in there, and I had a great time. But sure, that means there was just always those trade-offs. But if it wasn't for the fact that I was going to be leaving for the next 2 months, I probably would have put her off for another week. Okay, so that's where the sex and relationships for last week was, and that is my second most important thing to be working on every week. And then the next thing is my health and wellness, and go on a bicycle ride. I give myself a fail on that, and just wasn't the time available. Chi 5 times. I give myself a pass on that. Meditate daily. I'm going to be really hard on myself because I meditated 5 days, but I did not meditate every day, which was my intent, and so I give myself a fail. Go on 3 walks. I give myself a pass on that. Take my allergy cocktail daily, and that's not an actual cocktail. It's 3 different essential oils that go together that makes it so that I years ago stopped having to take allergy medications, and right now, though I've got some itchy ears, that I can that's a symptom of allergy issues, and I can clear it up by simply taking these essential oils every single day. But I give myself a fail on that because I only did it for 5 days out of 7 last week. 2 recodes. I give myself a fail on that because I only did 1 recode last week. And so when you list these things out, yes, be hard on yourself. And that's why I do a pass and fail, because you either cut the mustard or you don't. And so you want to go ahead and use the same structure, have those 3 categories. And then whatever category is the most important, put it at the top. The second most important goes in the middle, and then the lowest category then down there at the bottom. And so you want to go ahead and do that for yourself, And if you ever want to then chat with me about that, then get a hold of me and we can chat about that. You can share it with me or whatever you want to do. So then the next thing is that we go into is talking about accomplishments for the week, and I'm going to skip over that, and only because I want to get to the next one, and I'm running long here, and I'm not wanting to take and go way over on time today. But so the next one is bottlenecks, breakdowns, and breakthroughs. Okay, well, here's where I'm going to talk about me being the bottleneck. You see, I've talked to you before about how I find technology things just really difficult, and I kind of struggle with things, and sometimes, like, I talk with my partner Kat about things. I talk with my girlfriend in Seattle, Chris, about these things, and it's like, yeah, Mark, you sure do have technological things that happen, and like, how do these things happen to you, And I don't know. I honestly don't. And so last week I realized, like, I hold Kat up on the things that she is being held up waiting on me, and then I hold myself up, my own income, that is, I'm transitioning to online. Well, see, the process that I'm working towards is to go ahead and create, like, these right now, these online stores, and I'm going to create 7 of them, the first of which is called thehomenudist.com. And then I'm going to create 7 stores, and then have each store be bringing in a minimum of $1,000 a month above and beyond its pure profit, above and beyond the advertising costs and anything else that it goes into it. But $1,000 a month. Now, I know people that will create one e-commerce site and make over $100,000 a month on it. And so, this thing's very reasonable to make a minimum of $1,000 a month. So the idea that I have here is, with 7 sites, you're diversified so that you're not all your eggs are in one basket. So you're diversified, and then I'd be able to take and build those up a little bit and get them going. So when I'm making $5,000 a month in sustainable income, it could come from one site. It could take all 7 sites to get there. But once I get up to $5,000 a month, then I was going to hire a virtual assistant in training, somebody that is an entry-level employee in the Philippines, where then I work with that person to utilize the software and special programs that I have and help them just to take over from where I left off, and then they continue to build from there, going from making $5,000 a month to making $10,000, and then to $20,000 a month, and like that. And so that's where it becomes very passive, and it doesn't take up much of me for just going ahead and checking in daily for about 10-15 minutes with that assistant in the Philippines. But so the thing is, though, then I realized last week that I really am the bottleneck when it comes to this technology, and also I just have so many other things that are going on that I don't always get as much time with this stuff as I would like to. Last week, the technology was about all over Skype, all about Skype, and that I have a coach. I have many coaches, but one coach that I have with these stores, he gives me one-on-one assistance a couple times a week, and my issues were 2/3 of my time, if not 3/4 of my time, was spent dealing with problems that I was having with Skype. I've never used Skype before, and they just, I said to him, I said, well, don't you have some other way that we can do this? And he says, well, we've been doing this for years, and nobody else has problems with it. And I certainly was. Now we got the problems ironed out. But the thing is, I had 4 30-minute appointments last week with this coach. And so 4 30-minute appointments. Out of those 4 appointments, I really only got about 30 minutes of work done because of all the messes that we're having with Skype. Now, at this point, I got all those difficulties finally ironed out, and so we can move forward in the future without those problems that we're having on Skype, which is good, but I hate to have to waste 3/4 of the time just struggling with something before I can start to make progress. And last week, then, I had to look at these things seem to happen to me routinely. And so I'm the bottleneck here. In the bottleneck, what I say to myself then is that, all good business owners, the best business owners or the best also managers in business, not necessarily owners of the business, but managers in business, they talk about that their key is surrounding themselves with people who are much better than they are. And they surround themselves with the best people. And so, I thought, why? Because my skills really are managing people. I've run sales crews of 400 salespeople in the past. These are people that I recruited and trained and developed a sales force, and so then it's like, if I'm the bottleneck trying to do this stuff myself instead of trying to build the team, that's where my skills are. Then why am I continuing to be the bottleneck? What I need to do is I need to replace myself. I need to stop falling on myself and just get out of the way. Now, that means then, yes, that means that I'm going to, before the money's coming in, I'm going to have to take some of the money I have coming in from other sources and use that money then and invest it into moving myself out of the way. And so, but what I want to do here is that, because when I realized last week that I was being the bottleneck, because one of my desires in about another 2 years is to help people who are ethically and consensually non-monogamous and help them to liberate themselves from a paycheck and have numerous options and opportunities and programs for them to be able to liberate themselves from a paycheck. And so in doing that, I'm sure I'm going to come across people that have all kinds of challenges. Like my best friend, for instance, he's very smart. He's in a master's program. He's been in the military. He's a retired officer in the Marine Corps, and he now works for the federal government in a kind of a secret hush-hush type program. And so, but he's in this master's program, and so he's really smart. But he just doesn't have a lot of extra time. He would love to create a passive online income. Well, in about 2 more years, one of the things I want to be able to offer him and others that don't have the time is where maybe, like my friend, he could probably move things around in his budget to come up with an extra $300 a month. And with an extra $300 a month, then he can take and pay my virtual assistant people to create everything for him. So anyway, I don't want to get too deep on that, but that's one of the goals and objectives I have. And so I realize that my being the bottleneck now is really nothing more than the same situations other people are going to have in the future that I want to help to mentor and help them to create these incomes so that they can become liberated financially. And so if I'm going to be able to do that, I have to realize then how to take care of bottlenecks, because everybody's going to have different situations and different bottlenecks, but it always comes back to ourselves. And so we got to say, well, then what could I do about this? And make a long list of what I could do. And that's what I did last week. And then what am I going to do? And so that's when I realized that I just need to get out of my own way and hire the person now that I'm going to be turning this stuff over to, and let that person then build these stores instead of me. And so that was my breakthrough as well then, is that I'm the bottleneck. And so I had a terrific breakthrough on that. My breakdown was the problems that I was having with technology, and but it all ended up good at the end of the week. And so focus on this coming week. I'm going to come right back here to the list of items that I had at the top of this, because I had so many failures that basically then I just simply go back and go through my list. I've listed this all out. Only this week, as I said, then like tomorrow, I've got 8:30 appointment to get my car into the garage, and I've got a bunch of work I'll be taking over there to the garage with it while they not only do the brakes, but a couple other things as well, so that I can get ready to go to Seattle. And I'm leaving then Wednesday morning. Along the way to Seattle, I'm going to take 3 days for the drive And along the way, I'm going to be stopping and picking up a door for my bus. As many of you know, I am got a Greyhound bus that's converted into a motorhome that I am selling. I've owned it for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. And this is just a really cool motorhome. I can no longer drive it because of shoulder injuries that I've incurred in an auto accident a couple years ago. The bus doesn't have power steering, and it's a bear to turn. And so I can't really any longer drive it for very long distances. And so then, I'm going to be taking and changing and modifying this list, because you're narrowing it down to what I can feel like I could really get done. And then I'll hold the rest in reserve. And because I'm going to take 3 days to drive back to Seattle, and I'll get back to Seattle then on Friday sometime. And then I'll have Saturday and Sunday, because my weeks run from Monday. Start on Monday is my first day of the week, and Sunday is my last day of the week. I kind of like having the week instead of the weekend, kind of split. I like to have, like it is in a calendar week. I like to have 7 days where my weekend is at the end of the week. And so it starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. And so when I get to Seattle, my girlfriend there hasn't seen me since February. And that's when I was flying back and forth. So it was a lot easier to get to Seattle then. And now I will not get on an airplane with this COVID-19. And so I'll be driving. And instead of going there frequently, I'll go there less frequently. It costs a lot more money to drive than it does to fly back and forth, and takes a lot more time. And so I'm going to be then probably spending a good deal of my time on Saturday, I would guess, with my girlfriend, and she'll, want my time then. And so there's a lot of things on my list that are just not going to get done this week. And I'm okay with that, because then we pick it up. And I think my girlfriend's actually on vacation next week. And we had planned to go on a national park tour, and to Mount Zion Park or something like that, our Zion National Park and one other national park. I had reservations that she had made. She lost some money on that and all, but again, because of COVID-19, we just are not going. People are crazy out there and not being responsible in the way that they need to. And so I let them live their life, and I make my choices then. And it's just like when I don't agree with people's safe sex standards, I don't criticize or condemn them. I just make my own choices, and my choices are usually then not to have sex with someone. And so in this case, my choice then is just to not be going into those national parks. And so anyway, that's enough for that. And so I thank you very much for being here with me tonight. And if you do have any questions or anything for me, be sure to put them in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. But until then, next week on Monday night, we'll be back between 8 and 8:30 for the next update, and I'll look forward to seeing you then. So have a great week, everybody. Talk to you then.